They say hindsight is 20/20, and now I know how blind I had been to the cracks forming in what I thought was a rock-solid marriage. Lisa and I met during college, and we built our life together with the kind of love story most people only dream of. We had a beautiful home in our suburban city, good jobs, mine in IT and hers in marketing, and a circle of friends who admired our relationship. From the outside, we were the perfect couple. But perfection has a way of hiding rot, and I didn't see it until it was too late. It started small, almost unnoticeable at first. Lisa became more independent. Not the good kind, where she grew or achieved something meaningful, but the kind that eroded the partnership we once had. She stopped waiting for me to have dinner together, claiming she was busy. She started going out with friends I'd never met, laughing off my attempts to learn more about them. Our conversations, once filled with jokes, dreams, and shared interests, became transactional, more like business exchanges than heart-to-hearts. When I tried to bring it up, she dismissed me. "You're overthinking, Eric. Everyone needs space," she'd say with a carefree smile, brushing off my concerns. I wanted to believe her. Who wants to think their marriage is unraveling? So, I ignored the unease growing in the pit of my stomach. It wasn't until one night, about 3 months before everything imploded, that I noticed how far apart we had grown. Lisa was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, smiling at something, or someone, on the screen. When I asked her what was so funny, she locked her phone and shrugged. "Just memes," she said, but her body language told a different story. I could have pressed further, but I didn't. Instead, I told myself that marriages go through phases, that this was just a rough patch. The lies we tell ourselves can be surprisingly convincing. The bomb dropped on a Saturday afternoon. We were having lunch at a trendy downtown cafe, a place she insisted we try. Lisa had been unusually cheerful that day, almost giddy. I thought, perhaps naively, that this was a turning point for us, that we were reconnecting. Then, mid-conversation, she leaned back in her chair, took a sip of her wine, and said it. "I've been thinking," she began, her voice light, as though she were about to suggest a new vacation spot. "Maybe we should try an open marriage." I stared at her, fork frozen halfway to my mouth. "What?" "You know," she said, waving her hand as though it was the most casual idea in the world. "We've been together for so long. It's natural to want to explore other experiences. I think it could be good for us." I couldn't speak. My mind was racing, trying to comprehend the words coming out of her mouth. This wasn't the woman I married. This wasn't the Lisa who used to laugh at my bad jokes, hold my hand during storms, or talk about growing old together. When I finally found my voice, it came out shaky. "Are you saying you want to cheat on me?" She laughed, a sharp dismissive sound that made my stomach turn. "It's not cheating if we agree to it. Besides, no one owns anyone. I'm my own person, Eric, and so are you." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Ownership. That's what she thought this was about. As if I saw her as a possession rather than a partner. I wanted to yell, to demand how she could reduce our marriage to something so transactional, so shallow. But all I could do was sit there, staring at the stranger across the table. When I didn't respond, she leaned forward, her tone softening as if she were trying to sell me on a new gadget. "Think about it. It could be freeing. We'd still have each other, but without the pressure. It's what a lot of modern couples do." Her phone buzzed, and she glanced at it briefly before silencing it. The small action didn't escape me, nor did the smile she failed to hide. Someone else was already in the picture. She wasn't suggesting an open marriage, she was asking for permission to continue whatever she'd already started. That night, I barely slept. Lisa acted as though nothing had happened, scrolling through her phone in bed while I lay awake, my thoughts spinning out of control. The woman I loved, the woman I had built my life with, was gone. In her place was someone I didn't recognize, someone who saw our marriage as an obstacle to her freedom. The cracks weren't just cracks anymore. The foundation was crumbling, and I knew deep down that no amount of love or effort could patch it up. The days that followed Lisa's open marriage revelation were the longest of my life. She seemed almost indifferent, as if her suggestion was a minor adjustment, like changing the color of the living room walls. I, on the other hand, was trapped in a cycle of anger, sadness, and disbelief. Every moment spent near her was suffocating, every smile she gave me felt fake, every touch hollow. But what pushed me over the edge wasn't her words, it was her actions. Or rather, the ones I uncovered when I decided to stop being passive and start paying attention. It started with her phone. For years, I respected her privacy, believing that trust was the cornerstone of our marriage. But trust only works when it's mutual, and Lisa had smashed ours to pieces. That night, when she left her phone charging in the kitchen and went to take a shower, I made my move. My hands trembled as I unlocked her phone using the password I'd seen her type hundreds of times. Part of me still hoped I'd find nothing, just some innocent messages with friends that had been blown out of proportion in my paranoid mind. Instead, what I found was than I had imagined. There were text threads with a man named Evan. The messages were explicit, graphic even, detailing meetups, inside jokes, and conversations that were far too familiar. They painted a picture of two people who were not just having sex, but building something deeper, something she had no right to have outside of our marriage. One message stood out, and it hit me like a hammer to the chest: "Can't wait to see you this weekend. Eric's getting clingy again, so I need the escape." Escape. That was how she saw me. Not as her partner, her husband, or the man who loved her unconditionally, but as a prison she needed to flee from. I put her phone down and sat at the kitchen table, my head in my hands. Anger surged through me, hot and blinding. I wanted to scream, to confront her, to make her feel even a fraction of the betrayal that was ripping through me. But instead, I forced myself to stay calm. Lisa didn't deserve the satisfaction of knowing how she'd hurt me, not yet. The confrontation happened the next day. I waited until after dinner, when we were sitting in the living room. Lisa was scrolling through her phone again, oblivious to the storm brewing beside her. "Who's Evan?" I asked, my voice deceptively steady. Her reaction was instant and telling. She froze, her eyes darting toward me, wide with panic. Then, like flipping a switch, she composed herself, feigning confusion. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb, Lisa," I said, holding up her phone. I'd taken screenshots of the messages and sent them to myself as insurance. I know everything. The texts. The meetups. The lies. So just admit it. Her face hardened, and for a moment, I thought she might actually apologize or at least try to salvage the situation. Instead, she doubled down. "So what?" She snapped, crossing her arms. "You're not my owner, Eric. I'm allowed to have my own life." "Your own life?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You mean sleeping with another man while pretending to be my wife?" She rolled her eyes, her dismissiveness like pouring gasoline on a fire. "This is why I brought up the open marriage idea. You're so controlling. You think just because we're married, I owe you something. Newsflash, Eric, I'm not your property." Her words were like daggers, each one cutting deeper than the last. This wasn't just betrayal, it was mockery. She wasn't sorry for what she'd done. If anything, she seemed to think she was in the right. "I gave you everything," I said, my voice breaking despite my efforts to stay strong. "I trusted you. I built a life with you. And this is how you repay me." Lisa shrugged, leaning back against the couch. "Maybe you should have been paying more attention. If you had, you'd have seen this coming." That was it. The final straw. Whatever love I still had for Lisa evaporated in that moment, replaced by something colder and sharper. I realized then that the woman I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone who didn't care who she hurt as long as she got what she wanted. "I want a divorce," I said, the words cutting through the air like a knife. Lisa blinked, caught off guard for the first time. "What?" "You heard me," I said, standing up. "I'm done. You can have your freedom, Lisa. Enjoy it." She scoffed, trying to play it off. "You're being dramatic. People have affairs all the time. It's not a big deal." "It's a big deal to me," I said firmly. "And I'm not going to stay in a marriage where I'm treated like an afterthought." For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of fear in her eyes, but she quickly masked it with arrogance. "Fine," she said with a shrug. "You're making a mistake, Eric. You'll regret this." I didn't answer. I just walked out of the room, leaving her to sit with the weight of her own choices. Filing for divorce wasn't easy. It meant untangling years of shared finances, property, and memories. But it was necessary. Lisa barely fought the proceedings, too preoccupied with her new life to care about what she was losing. The day the papers were finalized, I walked out of the courthouse with a strange mix of emotions. Sadness, relief, and a simmering anger that I couldn't quite shake. I didn't know it then, but that anger would eventually find its purpose. Lisa had hurt me in ways I didn't think were possible, and though I was determined to move on, I also knew that someday, somehow, she would face the consequences of her actions. I just didn't realize how soon that day would come. The first few weeks after the divorce felt like walking through a fog. I stayed in the same city, not out of attachment, but because this was my home. I had my job, my friends, and a sense of normalcy I desperately needed to cling to. Lisa could keep the fantasy of her new life. I wasn't about to uproot mine just because she couldn't keep her vows. At first, everything reminded me of her. The smell of her favorite coffee shop downtown, the quiet hum of our empty house, even the damn dog park we used to visit on weekends. But I refused to let the weight of her betrayal crush me. I threw myself into work, taking on extra projects and diving headfirst into the parts of my life I'd neglected while trying to save our doomed marriage. Around this time, I started hearing bits and pieces about Lisa through mutual acquaintances. Though I avoided her and her circle like the plague, the city wasn't big enough to escape completely. Word spread quickly that she'd moved in with some guy, probably Evan, though I didn't care enough to confirm, and that their relationship was as unstable. "She's been hitting the party scene hard," a coworker mentioned one day during lunch, clearly enjoying the gossip. "I saw her last week at that new club on 5th. Looked like she was out of her mind." I pretended to brush it off with a shrug, but deep down, it gave me a sick sense of satisfaction. Lisa had wanted freedom, and now she was drowning in it. From what I heard, her carefree life was anything but. People whispered about her erratic behavior, her constant need for attention, and the shady crowd she was running with. At first, I tried to tune it all out. Lisa's downfall wasn't my business anymore, and I had no intention of letting her drama pull me back into her orbit. But the more I heard, the harder it was to ignore. Her name seemed to pop up everywhere, in casual conversations, in whispers at the bar, even in a local news report about a drug-related altercation at one of the clubs she frequented. Still, I kept my distance. Until one day, I ran into her by accident. It was a crisp fall afternoon, and I was grabbing a coffee at my favorite spot downtown. As I walked out of the cafe, there she was, Lisa standing on the corner, arguing with a man I didn't recognize. Her once polished appearance was noticeably disheveled. Her hair, usually styled to perfection, hung limp around her face, and her clothes looked hastily thrown together. I ducked back into the cafe, staying out of sight. From my vantage point, I could see the argument escalating. The man was tall and imposing, gesturing wildly as he spoke, while Lisa looked increasingly cornered. For a brief moment, I felt a flicker of concern, but it was quickly smothered by the memory of her words, "I'm my own person." Eventually, the man stormed off, leaving Lisa standing alone on the sidewalk. She pulled out her phone, her hands shaking as she dialed. I couldn't hear the conversation, but her expression told me everything I needed to know. She was in trouble. That encounter stuck with me. Part of me wanted to reach out, to ask her what the hell she was doing and why she was throwing her life away. But a larger part of me knew better. Lisa had made her choices, and I wasn't about to clean up her mess. Then came the tipping point. It was a chilly Monday morning, and I was scrolling through my phone before heading to work when a headline caught my eye: DA busts major drug shipment, 2 arrested in local operation. Curiosity got the better of me, and I clicked the link. The article detailed a DEA sting operation that intercepted a large shipment of cocaine being smuggled into the city. 2 suspects had been arrested at the scene. A man named Evan Grayson and a woman whose name made my stomach drop, Lisa Matthews. The accompanying photo showed Lisa being escorted in handcuffs, her face pale and her eyes wide with fear. Her once proud demeanor was gone, replaced by something I hadn't seen in years: vulnerability. I stared at the screen, a strange mix of emotions churning inside me. Shock, vindication, even a small pang of pity. But mostly, I felt satisfaction. Lisa had spent the past year treating me like I was beneath her, acting as though she was untouchable. And now, she was sitting in a jail cell, caught up in something far bigger than she could handle. As the details of the case unfolded, it became clear that Lisa's involvement wasn't just incidental. She had been living with Evan, who turned out to be a mid-level player in a drug trafficking ring. According to the report, Lisa had been helping him launder money and transport packages, either out of desperation or sheer stupidity. It was a textbook case of arrogance meeting reality. Lisa had thought she could outrun her problems, that her charm and beauty would shield her from the consequences of her choices. But now, she was facing serious charges: possession with intent to distribute, money laundering, and conspiracy. The potential sentence: decades in federal prison. And the best part? She had no idea what was coming next. I decided I wasn't done with Lisa just yet. After everything she put me through, watching her face justice wasn't enough. I wanted her to feel the full weight of her choices. I wanted her to know that the person she discarded, the man she dismissed as controlling, still had power, and I intended to use it. But I wouldn't do it recklessly. No, this would be calculated, deliberate. And by the time I was finished, Lisa would have nothing left to cling to. Let the games begin. Lisa's arrest was the talk of the town. A woman who once flaunted her superiority over me and boasted about her freedom was now plastered on news channels and online articles, her name forever tied to a botched drug operation. For days, I couldn't go anywhere without hearing someone gossip about her. At work, my coworkers whispered in the break room. At the gym, people scrolled through their phones, murmuring her name. She had wanted attention. She had it now. At first, I told myself to stay out of it. The courts would handle her, and she'd get what she deserved. But the more I thought about the way she had humiliated me, mocked me, and dismissed me, the more I realized I wasn't satisfied with letting fate take its course. I had resources, connections, and most importantly, time to plan. Lisa's life had already spiraled, but I wanted to make sure it hit rock bottom. The first step was understanding her situation. I started by pulling every piece of information I could find about the case. Public court documents, media coverage, and even whispers from people who knew Evan. I learned that Lisa wasn't just an innocent bystander. According to the investigation, she had willingly participated in Evan's schemes. She'd acted as a courier, moving money and drugs between locations, and helped forge financial records to make it all look legitimate. The DEA had caught them red-handed. Evan had tried to negotiate a deal by naming bigger players in the operation, but Lisa, she had no leverage. She was just a cog in the machine, and the prosecutors were coming down hard on her. Still, there was a chance she could wiggle out of it. Lisa always had a way of charming people, of spinning a narrative that painted her as the victim. I couldn't let that happen. I contacted an old college friend, Alex, who worked in law enforcement. Alex wasn't involved in the case, but he had access to networks and databases that could give me the edge I needed. Over drinks one evening, I casually brought up Lisa's name. "Crazy, who?" I said, swirling the ice in my glass. "Never thought I'd see her face in the news." Alex smirked. "Yeah, I saw that. She really screwed up." "What's the word on the case?" I asked, feigning casual interest. "Think she's got a shot at walking away?" Alex shook his head. "Not likely. The DEA has a solid case. But you know, these things can go either way if a good defense attorney gets involved. She's claiming she didn't know what was happening, that Evan manipulated her. Classic strategy." I nodded, filing the information away. Lisa was already working the system, trying to paint herself as a clueless victim. I couldn't let her weasel out of the consequences. Not this time. The second step was ensuring the prosecutors had everything they needed to bury her. I combed through the evidence I had from our marriage, financial records, emails, even old conversations that hinted at Lisa's willingness to bend the rules for her own benefit. She had always been a risk-taker, often flirting with unethical practices at work to get ahead. I packaged everything neatly, removing any trace that it came from me, and sent it anonymously to the DEA's tip line. But I didn't stop there. I also reached out to a few of Lisa's former friends, people she had burned bridges with over the years. One of them, a woman named Karen, was all too eager to share stories of Lisa's reckless behavior, including an incident where Lisa had bragged about moving stuff for Evan. I encouraged Karen to share her story with the authorities, framing it as doing her civic duty. Weeks passed, and the fallout for Lisa only grew worse. The local news reported on additional evidence submitted to the case, financial irregularities, corroborating witness statements, and even a photo of Lisa handing off a package to someone in a parking lot. The prosecutors were building a mountain of evidence, and Lisa's "I didn't know" defense was crumbling. I kept tabs on the trial through public records and media coverage. Each time Lisa's name came up, it was in connection with damning evidence or a new charge. Her defense attorney tried to argue that she had been coerced by Evan, but the prosecutors countered with overwhelming proof of her active involvement. The cherry on top came during the trial itself. One of the witnesses, a former associate of Evan's, testified that Lisa had not only been aware of the drug shipments but had also suggested ways to avoid detection. The courtroom gasped, and I couldn't help but smile when I read the transcript. Lisa, the woman who once claimed she was too smart to be caught up in anything, was now being portrayed as a willing accomplice. The sentencing hearing was broadcast live, and I watched from the comfort of my living room. Lisa sat at the defense table, her face pale and drawn. She looked nothing like the confident, arrogant woman I once knew. The judge didn't hold back, sentencing her to 25 years in federal prison without parole. The weight of the sentence hit her like a freight train, and for the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. As the guards led her away, she glanced toward the gallery, searching for someone, anyone, who might offer her comfort. But there was no one. Lisa had burned too many bridges, and now she was alone, left to face the consequences of her choices. That night, I poured myself a drink and sat on the back porch, staring at the city skyline. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. Lisa had taken so much from me. My trust, my dignity, my peace of mind. But now, the scales were balanced. She was where she belonged, and I had my life back. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about closure. And as I raised my glass to the night sky, I knew one thing for certain. I would never let anyone like Lisa take anything from me again. Lisa's sentencing marked the end of one chapter in my life and the beginning of another. Watching her face the consequences of her arrogance and betrayal was cathartic, but the satisfaction I felt wasn't entirely about revenge. It was the closure I needed to finally move forward. I'd let her walk over me for too long, and her downfall was a reminder of just how far I'd come since the day she shattered our marriage. Still, I couldn't deny that there was a poetic justice to it all. Lisa had demanded freedom. Freedom from me, from commitment, from the rules of a traditional relationship. She had dismissed me as controlling and clingy, mocked my pain, and flaunted her reckless decisions. And now, she was locked away, her so-called freedom reduced to a 6x8 cell in a federal prison. The irony wasn't lost on me. After her sentencing, Lisa's name slowly began to fade from the public eye. The media moved on to the next big story, and the gossip around town died down. But I wasn't quite ready to let her go just yet. There was one final thing I needed to do, not for her but for myself. I started by visiting the courthouse to review the public records from her trial. Among the documents was a full list of her assets, all of which were being liquidated to pay for her legal fees and restitution. The house she had moved into with Evan, her car, even her jewelry, everything was being sold off. It was a cold reminder of how far she'd fallen. Then, I made a decision that surprised even me. I bought one of her auctioned items, a small, unassuming piece of art that used to hang in our living room. It wasn't particularly valuable, but it had sentimental meaning. It was a painting we'd picked out together during the early days of our marriage, back when we were still in love. The act wasn't about rekindling old memories or holding on to the past. It was about reclaiming what she tried to take from me. That painting symbolized the life I thought we'd built together, and by taking it back, I was reminding myself that I had survived her betrayal and come out stronger. In the weeks that followed, I settled back into my routine. Work was going well, and I even started seeing someone, a woman named Claire, who I met at a networking event. She was smart, kind and down-to-earth, the kind of person who valued honesty and mutual respect. I didn't tell her much about Lisa at first. There was no point in dragging that baggage into something new. But as things progressed, I found myself opening up, sharing bits and pieces of my past. Claire listened without judgment, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to Lisa's fiery arrogance. "You've been through a lot," she said one evening over dinner. "But it sounds like you handled it with grace." I laughed at that. Grace might be a stretch. There were definitely moments when I didn't. She smiled, reaching for my hand. "Well, you're here now. That's what matters." It was in that moment that I realized just how far I'd come. Lisa's betrayal had shattered me, but it hadn't defined me. I had rebuilt my life, found happiness again, and learned to trust myself. Lisa might still be trapped in the wreckage of her choices, but I was free. One afternoon, months after Lisa's sentencing, I received an unexpected letter in the mail. It was from her. A handwritten note sent from prison. The sight of her familiar script made my chest tighten, but curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. The letter was exactly what I expected. A mixture of regret, self-pity, and veiled manipulation. She apologized for everything that happened, though she carefully avoided taking full responsibility. She blamed Evan for dragging her into his criminal world, blamed the justice system for being too harsh, and even blamed me in a roundabout way, for not understanding her need for independence. But what struck me most was the final paragraph. "I hope you can forgive me," she wrote. "I don't expect you to help me, but knowing you don't hate me would mean a lot. You were a good man, Eric, even if I didn't see it at the time." I folded the letter and set it aside. Forgiveness? Maybe one day, I'd get there. But not yet. Lisa's apology felt hollow, more about easing her conscience than making amends. She wasn't asking for forgiveness, she was asking for a lifeline, and I wasn't about to throw her one. Instead of replying, I packed up the letter and tucked it away in a drawer. It wasn't worth my energy. Lisa had made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. I had no obligation to give her closure, not when I was finally finding mine. The next time I passed by the painting I'd reclaimed from her auction, I stopped to look at it. For years, it had been a symbol of a love that turned into betrayal, a reminder of what I'd lost. But now, it was something else entirely. It was a testament to my resilience, a reminder that I had taken back control of my life. Lisa had tried to rewrite the rules of our marriage, dismissing me as collateral damage in her pursuit of freedom. But in the end, she was the one who lost everything. And I was finally free, truly free, for the first time in years. I turned away from the painting and walked out of the room, leaving the past behind me where it belonged. Thank you for watching till the end. If you enjoyed the story, make sure to hit the like button. It only takes a second, but it means a world to us. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss our upcoming videos. Something brand new is dropping tomorrow. And hit the notification bell to among the first to see it. See you in the next video.